You think you know who you are? You walk through the world with your judgments, neatly organize what's good, what's bad, what's acceptable, what's disgusting. But every time you flinch at someone else's behavior, every time you label someone narcissistic, weak, manipulative, or pathetic, you're revealing something about yourself. Not them. You. This is the first truth most people never recover from. The world you perceive is a mirror. The parts of others that irritate you the most are often the parts of yourself you've buried the deepest. Call it discernment. You call it standards. But more often, it's projection, Jung's most enduring insight. What you haven't integrated within yourself will show up around you again and again, wearing different faces, until you finally have the courage to face it. You aren't angry at the world because it's evil. You're angry because it reflects your unclaimed potential and your disowned darkness, the narcissist you despise. Maybe you once tried to express your confidence and it got punished, so you buried it, and now it stabs you from the outside. The weak man you scorn. He's holding the helplessness you vowed never to feel again. But he's not your enemy. He's your mirror. You want peace, but you divide the world into allies and enemies. You want freedom, but you shackle yourself to a false identity constructed entirely on rejection. Until you reclaim the parts you've disowned, you're not whole. You're just fragmented control, This isn't spiritual fluff. It's psychological warfare. You live inside the battlefield of your own mind, and every enemy you name is a soldier you sent to the other side. You can dismiss this, of course. Can call it just how things are, but the truth doesn't care. Keeps reflecting back at you. You're not afraid of the world. You're afraid of what the world says about you. And until you see that, you'll keep living in reaction. Not solved disgust is not arbitrary. It's not some divine compass for right and wrong. It's a flare your psyche's emergency signal that you've encountered a part of yourself you've exiled. You feel disgust when something external violates the internal image you're desperately trying to maintain. It's not because it's wrong, but because it's dangerous to the fragile story you tell yourself about who you are. When you see someone loud, needy, arrogant, fakened you, recoil. It's not just about them, it's about you. Somewhere deep inside, a memory stirs. Maybe you were punished for being loud. Maybe your neediness was shamed, so you buried it. Now, whenever someone embodies what you rejected in yourself, your disgust activates. It's not a verdict, it's a mirror. Disgust is often a sign that your ego is defending a border it doesn't want crossed. That border is drawn between your conscious persona and your unconscious shadow. Jung called this your inferior function, the part of you you never developed. It's never integrated because it was too threatening to your self-image. But the psyche doesn't forget. It stores every banned impulse. And here's the cruel twist. The more you suppress, the more violently you react when you see it in others. The more virtuous your mask, the more disgusted you become by anything that threatens to rip it off. Disgust is not about trut, the people you label repulsive. Might be the very keys to your integration. Not because you should become them, but because you already are, in some way you haven't faced. Until you can look at what you hate and say, that lives in me, you're not growing, you're posturing. This is the part no one wants to admit. You're not above the things that disgust you. You're often just unpracticed in their expression, and so they terrify you. Disgust isn't just rejection, it's recognition. A violent one. The face you sneer at, maybe the one you wore before the world tally your shadow, doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door down with disgust. You'd be wise to listen. You'd think you're better than them. That's the story your ego feeds you when disgust doesn't work. You see others acting in ways you can dimension-seeking. Dishonest, manipulative, weekend you climb the moral ladder. You look down from a righteous height and declare yourself above it all. But moral superiority is often a psychological disguise. It doesn't reflect virtue, it reflects fear. You moralize most viciously around the traits you secretly envy or fear you might possess. Why? Because judgment keeps you at a safe distance. It gives you a shield. You don't have to look at your own contradictions if you're busy condemning others for theirs. You cast yourself as the hero, restrained, disciplined, fair, and cast others as the flawed ones, but behind every high ground is a wound. You weren't born sanctimonious. You became that way because it was safer than being real. Somewhere in your life, someone punished you for wanting too much, needing too loudly, or expressing yourself without a filter. So you cut those parts off, and then you declared war on them wherever you saw them again. Jung said, "We all walk in, shoes too small for us. You moralize because your soul is cramped." You've disowned so many parts of yourself in the name of being good that now anything outside your tiny box of acceptability feels offensive. But it's not offensive. It's expansive. You just forgot what it feels like to breathe fully. Here's the real danger. When you confuse repression with morality, you mistake suffocation for discipline. Then you teach others to do the same. You call shame guidance. You call fear ethics. Make your limitations sacred and your shadow demonic. But what if the people you judge are just more honest than you? What if they're not broken, but simply uninhibited in ways you've never allowed yourself to be that would shatter your story? And that's why you cling to judgment. Tit protects the narrative until you dismantle your own need to be the good one. You'll never know who you are beneath the mask. You'll keep living for approval, terrified of collapse. But individuation requires demolition, and the mask is always first to burn. You say you can spot them, instantly narcissists, egomaniacs, manipulators. You roll your eyes when they speak. You scoff at their vanity. You tell yourself you'd never behave like that. But deep down, something clenches, because part of you recognizes the game. It's not from the outside, it's from within. The narcissist isn't some alien creature. He's a distorted version of your own survival strategy. The inflated self-image, the hunger for validation. The mask of confidence stretched over fragile self-worth. These aren't foreign behaviors. They're familiar echoes. You've done the same things, but more discreetly. You've wanted the spotlight, you've sought approval. You've lied to protect your image. What you reject in the narcissist is the grotesque, reflection of a part of you that was once visiblent till the world shamed it. Maybe you were told not to be too full of yourself, so you shrank. Maybe your voice was silenced by someone louder, so you stayed small. And now, when someone acts with unfiltered ego, it feels like an attack, but it's not. It's a reminder of what you buried. Schopenhauer wrote that most people oscillate between arrogance and self-contempt, caught in a pendulum of overcompensation. That's narcissism in essence, a desperate attempt to feel significant in a world that keeps reducing you. And if you hate it so much, maybe it's because you're tired of playing that game in secret. The tragedy isn't that narcissists exist. It's that you've created a split in yourself, so wide that you can't tolerate seeing confidence unless it comes in the exact flavor you approve of. You label anything outside your template as toxic. But not all pride is poison. Not all confidence is ego. And not who become truly dangerous when you realize that the traits you hate most can be you. Meant the part what you see in him is what you need in you. Until you reclaim it, you'll keep casting shadows, pretending you're free while secretly starving. The narcissist is your mirror. The question is whether you'll shatter it, tore, or stare into it long enough to evolve. You think you can outrun it? If you're kind enough, calm enough, accomplished enough, maybe the darkness will go away. Maybe the old urges, the shameful thoughts, the repressed emotions will finally dissolve. But they don't. They wait. Your shadow isn't passive. It doesn't vanish just because you ignore it. It grows teeth in silence. Every part of yourself you deny, your rage, your jealousy, your arrogance, your lust doesn't disappear. Just slips underground, where it operates without your consent, and then it shows up. In the people you're drawn to. In the relationships that implode. In the self-sabotage you can't explain. Jung made it clear, you don't become enlightened by imagining light, but by making the darkness conscious. Shadow work is the confrontation with the parts of yourself you were taught to fear. Not spiritual romance, it's psychological bloodshed. Without it, you're not evolving, you're just decorating the prison. Think of your relationships, the partners who triggered you, the friends who betrayed you, the patterns that repeat. No matter how much insight you gain, that's your shadow at work. It pulls the strings when you're asleep at the wheel. It speaks through your tone, your silence, your attraction, your disgust, You don't choose who you love or hate at random. Your unconscious does. It orchestrates encounters to provoke what you've refused to confront. The more you deny your inner chaos, the more chaos you attract. Not because the world is cruel, but because your psyche is precise. Shadow work isn't a phase. It's a lifetime commitment. Not because you're broken, but because you're complex. The psyche is a system of tensions. Your growth depends on your ability to sit in that tension without moralizing, numbing, or fleeing. The parts of you that embarrass you, those are the gold. The envy you pretend you don't feel, the sexual impulse you coated in shame, the aggression you masked as politeness, that's where your power is buried. And until you dig it up, someone else will weaponize it against you. You don't get to skip the underworld. You only get to choose whether you walk in voluntarily. You'll get dragged by the ankle. You think it's just bad luck? Another toxic relationship, another draining friendship, another authority figure who treats you like you're invisible. But patterns aren't accidents. They're blueprints. Your psyche isn't punishing you, showing you what you haven't. Integrated on loop, you don't attract random people, you attract familiar wounds. Because what you don't repair, you recreate. That charming partner who turns distant once you get close. That friend who only calls when they need something. That boss who manipulates with praise and silence. They're not news stories. They're reruns. Jung called this psychic repetition. In angiodromia, the tendency of the psyche to swing between extremes until a third integrated state emerges. You repeat these people not because you're weak, but because your unconscious is attempting resolution. Each person is a test. Can you see the pattern this time? Can you hold your boundary? Can you name what you've always swallowed? But instead, you project. You blame the narcissist, the victim, the addict, the ghoster. You externalize the chaos and call it fate. But fate isn't some mystical force. It's your shadow, dressed up in other people's faces. You'll keep dating your absent father. You'll keep befriending your mother's emotional twin. You'll keep surrendering to the same power dynamics until you choose something different. Not just externally, but internally. The choice begins with awareness, not avoidance. Evolutionary psychology plays its part. Your brain seeks familiarity because it feels safe, even if it's dysfunctional. You're wired to recreate the emotional climate of your earliest bonds. It's not because they were healthy, but because they were known. And what's known feels like home. Even if it hurts, the pattern ends when you stop asking, why do they keep doing this to me? Start asking, why do I keep accepting this frequency? It ends when you stop analyzing their behavior and start decoding your own attraction to it. They aren't the problem. They're the mirror. And you'll keep meeting them over and over until the charge is gone, until their behavior no longer defines your identity, until your nervous system no longer finds comfort in chaos. You don't break the cycle by escaping others. You break it by confronting the version of you who keeps inviting them in. You think you're just being honest. You think you see things clearly. But most of your judgments aren't objective observations. They're psychological shields thin. Rigid barriers that keep you from seeing something unbearable within yourself. You say she's fake. You say he's needy. You call them weak, shallow, delusional. But these aren't just opinions. They're emotional reactions disguised as discernment. Judgment gives you relief. It creates separation. It says, I'm not that. But the very need to push something away so forcefully is evidence that part of you recognizes it, doesn't know what to do with it. When you judge others harshly, what you're really doing is protecting your identity. You're defending the version of yourself you worked so hard to construct, the stoic one, the strong one, the good one, the enlightened one. And anything that threatens that construction feels like a threat, so you attack. It's not to understand, but to distance. Judgment is the opposite of integration. Freezes the psyche in duality. Me versus them, higher versus lower, good versus bad. But individuation, the process Jung defined as becoming whole, requires the collapse of these false separations. It demands that you see what lives in you, before you label what lives in them. You don't have to approve of someone's behavior to see your reflection in it. You don't have to condone it to learn from it. Judgment isn't clarity. A form of control. It's your unconscious attempt to avoid the discomfort of ambiguity. But growth lives in that ambiguity. Think about the people you judge most quickly. What do they represent? Unchecked emotion, raw desire, neediness, ego. Those are your trailheads. That's the starting point of your integration. Because if you can't hold space for a trait in someone else, you definitely can't hold it in yourself. And so the loop continues. You judge, you reject, you fracture. You lose access to the full spectrum of your humanity. You call it wisdom, but it's not. It's fragility with a vocabulary. The work is simple, but not easy. When you feel the spike of judgment, pause. Ask yourself, what part of me have I locked away to need this reaction so badly? You'll be surprised what answers come back. And what freedom lies beneath the noise. You think you're in control? That you make choices from reason, values, logic. But Schopenhauer dismantled that illusion centuries ago. His premise was simple, brutal, and almost too honest to bear. You are not primarily driven by intellect, but by will and unconscious. Blind striving, rooted in biology, instinct, and survival. Your disgust, your attraction, your envy, your resentment, they don't originate from thought. They erupt from the will. And what you reject in others often isn't immoral or irrational, it's just unmastered. You push away what you haven't yet learned to dominate inside yourself. You call someone too emotional because you fear your own volcanic rage. You mock someone's ambition because you're afraid of your own dormant hunger. You're not rejecting them, you're rejecting what they awaken in your nervous system. What they make you feel, and here's the trap. The more you suppress your will, the more hostile you become toward others who embody it. The animal in you doesn't die, it turns inward. It eats at you. Or it turns outward in judgment, contempt. Superiority, Schopenhauer, said the will is like an endless striving without final satisfaction. Left unchecked, it devours meaning and breeds misery. But mastered, witnessed, and transformed, it becomes the raw material for power. But mastery isn't moral denial, it's conscious ownership. You don't transcend your biology by pretending it's not there. You transcend it by studying its patterns, recognizing its urges, and learning to use them without being used by them. The man who mocks another's sexuality is often the one most enslaved by his own impulses. The woman who belittles ambition may be the one who's never felt permission to pursue her own. Your will shows up in others to force you to notice where you've gone limp. It challenges your illusion of being above it all. But being evolved isn't about sterilizing your instincts, it's about integrating them so they serve you rather than sabotage you. The will isn't your enemy. Unconscious will is. Every person you react to is showing you where that unconscious force still governs you. You don't hate their power. You hate that you don't know how to wield your own. You want the world to make sense. You want to believe that the people who hurt you are monsters, that the ones you admire are perfect, and that your reactions are always justified. But this isn't truth, it's architecture. Psychological house built from projection. Projection is your first defense mechanism. You don't grow out of it, you get better at disguising it. You take parts of yourself you can't accept, your fear, your desire, your rage, your ambition, and place them onto others like emotional graffiti. It makes you feel safe, gives you the illusion of control. But projection distorts everything. It reduces people to props in your unresolved drama. You think you're reading reality, but you're reading your own unconscious story onto everyone you meet. The partner who doesn't respond fast enough becomes just like your father. The confident friend becomes intimidating. Quiet coworker is clearly judging you. You create these roles so you don't have to face your own discomfort. But the cost is enormous, because as long as you project, you cannot see. You cannot listen. You cannot grow. You become trapped in a hall of mirrors, mistaking your own reflection for the world. Jung warned us. What you do not make conscious will rule your life, and you will call it fate. This is what projection does. It turns your internal chaos into external circumstance, then it convinces you that you're the victim. But the truth is colder. No one is doing this to you. You are doing this to you. You are the writer, the director, and the actor in a theater of distortion. And every character you assign a label to is a clue about what you haven't yet faced within. The moment you stop blaming and start noticing, something radical happens. Your power returns. You stop being a puppet and become a strategist. You stop reacting and start observing. Start asking real questions. What does this person trigger in me? What does this say about the parts of myself I've ignored in projection? Isn't weakness, it's unconsciousness. You don't eliminate it by forcing you to dissolve it with brutal honesty. Because once you reclaim what you've pushed away, the world no longer has to hold it for you. You've spent your life trying to be good, not whole, not real, just good. You've smoothed your edges, filtered your language, sanitized your thoughts. You've buried the chaos, the lust, the envy, the cruelty, anything that might threaten the mask. But the parts you lock away don't die, they grow teeth. And eventually, they bite back. The monster you've tried to kill is you. It's a part of you that gets jealous. The part that fantasizes about revenge. It's a part that wants control, dominance, recognition. The very parts you were taught to hate are the ones carrying your raw power, your vitality, your edge. Jung called this the shadow, the disowned self. And he didn't tell you to destroy it, told you to befriend it. Because until you own the monster, it owns you. Till you integrate the dark, you'll remain fragmented, reactive, manipulated by whatever you refuse to see. You think the monster makes you bad? But repression makes you weak. Every time you suppress a trait, you give it to someone else, someone louder, someone bolder, someone more dangerous. And then you live in fear of their power, forgetting it was yours first. True individuation isn't about perfection. It's about integration. It's about saying, yes, I am capable of rage, of desire, of selfishness, of ego, and I choose to wield them with precision. This is the difference between unconscious chaos and conscious command. Between being at the mercy of your instincts and turning them into instruments. The man who owns his capacity for destruction doesn't need to destroy. The woman who integrates her desire for control doesn't need to manipulate. Power that is owned becomes still, quiet, strategic. You don't have to prove it anymore. You just are. This is the turning point. The line between the puppet and the sovereign. You can keep rejecting the monster and living in projection, or you can turn toward it, shake its hand, and finally walk into wholeness. You don't become free by being pure. You become free by being complete. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be whole. And wholeness requires that you confront every part of yourself you've disowned, especially the ones that disgust, frighten, or shame you. The world isn't showing you enemies, it's showing you instructions. Every reaction is a signpost. Every judgment is a breadcrumb. Every repeated pattern is a doorway. Sovereignty isn't achieved by controlling others. It's forged in the fire of self-confrontation. True power is the ability to see clearly without flinching, to own your fear without obeying it, to use your shadow without becoming it. This is individuation, not a spiritual fantasy, but a strategic transformation. Because once you stop outsourcing your darkness, no one can use it against you. Once you reclaim the fragments, the mask drops. You stop playing roles. You stop begging for safety. You start choosing with awareness. You stop reacting. You start creating. That's the difference between a life of noise and a life of command. Between being acted upon and becoming the actor. You don't need to be good. You need to be whole. And wholeness begins the moment you stop pretending. If this video hit something Rodin, look away. Comment below. What trait in others triggers you the most? Why? Let's bring the shadow into the light together. Like, share, subscribe, if you're ready for the kind of psychological clarity most people avoid. Someone in your orbit needs to hear this today, and it might be you. Wholeness isn't comfortable, but it's yours to claim.